Hi guys, and welcome back to this scheme of videos on Elizabeth and in particular Elizabethan finance. Now we're into the very last video that I'm going to do about the Elizabethan financial situation under the Tudors, and that is on exploration and trade. Now, in 1577, Francis Drake, one of the characters who was particularly important in terms of exploration and trade, set out to circumnavigate the globe. Now, that meant he wanted to sail all the way around it. And he wanted to do so, firstly, to find new sources of trade, but also to challenge Spanish dominance. So, as you know, at this time, Spain had been able to colonize large parts of kind of America and South America far earlier than England in particular, and also quite a lot of other, of the prominent countries in Europe. Now, all of Francis Drake's actions are about challenging that dominance, about putting England onto that global stage. And as you can see on the image behind me, the green line is the line that he sailed around. Now, trade and exploration are therefore integral to English foreign policy and are not only just important for finance, but this is also important and comes into our topic on foreign policy, and especially England's relationship with Spain. All of this exploration and the interactions that Francis Drake and Raleigh have with Spain are very subtle ways through which Elizabeth sought to establish her dominance against Spain. On Francis Drake's successful return from his circumnavigation, that's the point that's really argued to have begun English exploration. Okay, so I just want to start there by making the point that yes, we're looking at finance and yes, we're looking at exploration around the world, but actually this is so important for many different areas of the Elizabeth course for the Elizabeth A level. Now, I just wanted to show you quickly this. So I've got a map behind me of the colonies. Now, I want you to imagine that you just see the yellow ones. The yellow ones are Spain, okay? And the other colonies are settled later on. So at the point of Francis Drake's circumnavigation, we mostly just have the yellow colonies, which are Spain. And they therefore clearly dominate in the New World. And this is giving them huge amounts of financial benefit, as well as, dominance and prestige. Now, at the same time as this is happening, Sir Walter Raleigh is encouraged by Drake's success. He's been able to circumnavigate around the world. This is fantastic. This is great. We can really put England on the map. And he persuades Elizabeth to grant him a charter to explore lands in North America. If I just go back to the map a second to show you. So what we're talking about here is this kind of strip of the 13 colonies. If you can see in pink just up here, that is the land that eventually England successfully settled. But imagine that's not there at the moment. That is where Raleigh is kind of envisaging that he wants to go and settle. So he gets his charter, and to try and combat mainland Spain again, who have already settled land in mainland Florida and much of South and Middle America, he wants to establish a region somewhere that Spain have not yet conquered. And he does this. And the first colony is established in Roanoke in 1584. Now, the Spanish and Portuguese colonies in the south had proved extremely lucrative. Spain was the wealthiest country in Europe. So this was Elizabeth's goal, to reap lots of financial rewards, to have raw materials with which she could trade, to have new trading routes, new trading partners, all of those things. Developing colonies was extremely lucrative at this time. Now, however, Roanoke failed to flourish and even led to the mystery of the lost colony, if you've heard of it. The colonists set up their colony. They have some early interactions with local tribes. They arrive too late for their seeds to grow effectively, so they rely on the tribes for help. And all of this gets to a point where Fernandez decides to leave the colony, sail back to England, and return with fresh supplies. What he didn't realize was that actually his return to England coincided with the Spanish Armada. Unfortunate. So he is unable to return straight away. He's delayed by the Armada because he can't exactly sail across, the sea when we have battles raging. So he is therefore late on his return. And when he does return, he finds an absolutely deserted part of the island. No trace at all of the colonists. There's Croatan is inscribed into the wood, which is what you can see in the image behind me. He finds a buried pit of lots of weapons. And to this day, we don't really know what happened to them. You know, the ideas are that they were either killed by the local tribes, or they joined the local tribes, or they went off in search of somewhere new to settle. There's loads and loads of different theories, and it's quite interesting if you want to read about it. But Roanoke is a failure. So the colony idea did not work in the first instance. It's not actually until Jamestown under James that we have the successful settlement of a colony in America. Now, that's kind of exploration summed up. So we're going to move on to trade. Now, to meet the ever-increasing cost of administration and expand the national economy, the English state needed to find new markets. This would hopefully increase trade opportunities and therefore raise the national wealth. If you remember in a previous video, I talked about the idea of trying to encourage trade, which would increase English finances and the English economy, as well as the crown's purse, because they can then tax and have tariffs on things. And it was just a highly beneficial and lucrative situation for everyone. Now, as we already know, Spain has explored much of West Africa, Central and South America, and through this they had gained new colonies, raw materials, and trade routes. While this was happening, England was preoccupied with the War of the Roses, and during this period lost all of its continental markets apart from the Netherlands. So one thing to kind of contextualize for this is that Spain are, you know, taking over most of the world at the same point that England is just fighting with each other. So that's why by the point of Elizabeth, we see such a kind of stark contrast in terms of the progress that we've made. Now, it's only really under Elizabeth that England starts to try and catch up. Now, one thing which is quite interesting under Elizabeth is that during her reign, internal trade also developed, and there was a significant growth in the shipping of coal from the Tyne up in Newcastle all the way down to the Thames to meet the demands of London markets. The value of internal trade considerably exceeded that of foreign trade. So it's really interesting to notice that during her reign, we start to really see the development of cities and cities working together and cities trading against each other. And that's partly because, as we heard earlier, of the migration of rural people to the urban centres. And so we have the growth of cities, so cities can start trading with each other. Now, previous to Elizabeth's reign, England could not have afforded to antagonise the Habsburg allies by breaking their monopoly of the Atlantic trade. However, after 1560, with the decline of the Antwerp market, it became a necessity. So this all meant that there was an increase of foreign luxury goods during Elizabeth's reign. These goods were becoming more affordable and therefore more accessible, and they were being transported around England through internal trade networks. Now, this also led to a need and perhaps a demand to kind of bring exploration into the idea of trade. And what they did is they created various different companies who would, I guess, work in various different parts of the world. These were often crown-created trading companies to exploit these markets. So I'm going to start with the first one, which is the Muscovy Company, which was created in 1555 to trade with Russia. So in 1553, Sir Hugh Willoughby and Richard Chancellor set out to find a route to China and the East Indies via a fabled Northwest Passage. They failed and only reached Archangel, a port on Russia's northwest coast. It was a dangerous route as it was part of the frozen Arctic Circle, and Willoughby actually died en route. However, it did mean that trade links with Russia were established, and a group of London merchants therefore set up the Muscovy Company to develop this trade link, and Elizabeth granted it a monopoly on whaling in 1577. So therefore we see a group of merchants benefiting from this exploration. Now, the next one I want to talk about is the Levant Company, which was created in 1581. This was trade with the Mediterranean. Now, trade with the Ottoman Turks and the Ottoman Empire established bases all over the Ottoman Empire, including Turkey, Egypt, Syria, and Algeria. It exported mainly cloth and tin, and it imported raw silk, yarn, carpets, spices, and cotton. So all those goods which can be made and grown and flourished in the kind of area of Turkey and Egypt and Syria with all the hotter climates. Now, trade was often disrupted in the Mediterranean by conflict, but it remained lucrative. And from 1600, the company agreed to make an annual contribution of £4,000 to the Crown's treasury after Elizabeth cancelled their royal charter to blackmail them into sharing their profits. So this shows us just how valuable these companies were to the Elizabethan state in terms of creating profits. Okay, and then lastly, we come to the East India Trading Company, created in 1599, which was dominated, or which aimed to have trade in the Indian Ocean. Now, this was established as a trading body for English merchants to participate in the East Indian spice trade. It was granted a charter by Elizabeth in 1600. However, it didn't really pick up until a bit later on in the Stuart period. But the spice trade had been monopolised by Spanish and Portuguese. However, after the defeat of the Spanish Armada, English merchants backed by Elizabeth began exploring breaking this up, and the company soon expanded its trade into spices to include cotton, silk, indigo, and tea. So what's really interesting with the East India Company is how you can link it to the consequences of the Spanish Armada and foreign policy. And it's really a sign that actually with the defeat of the Armada, England became the dominant country on the global stage, and that they were really able to benefit from things which previously Spain had monopolized and controlled. Now, I'm just going to go back in time slightly and talk about the Eastland Company, which was created in 1579, because it links to the Hanseatic League, which I'm going to talk to you about now for a little bit. So the Eastland Company was trade with the Baltic, and it was based in London, a company set up to establish trade links with Scandinavia and the Baltic. It also aimed to challenge the Hanseatic League's monopoly over trade in this region. The Hanseatic League, remember, was a commercial confederation of merchant guilds from Northwest and Central Europe. So what was happening in this time, and I'm just going to kind of cut forward slightly actually. So because we have a decline of Antwerp as a financial and trading city, and the fact it's now controlled by Spain, remember also we have the sacking of Antwerp. So Antwerp is considerably declining in its influence. It meant England's trading links focused on the Hanseatic League instead. The League had ports in Germany, the Netherlands, Denmark, and Sweden, and was therefore powerful and wealthy, dominating trade in this region. Now, because they were doing so well, they were able to set up privileged commercial bases in certain locations like Novgorod in Russia, Bergen in Norway, Bruges in Flanders, and in London they created a place called the Steel Yard. And through that they traded. Now, the League was a very powerful trading base, but also a military ally and had significant diplomatic influence. The League was bringing Elizabeth a lot of profit. However, there soon developed competition between England's own merchants and the League. And it was these merchants that I'm talking about which were the Eastland Company, okay? And they were competing with the Hanseatic League. They imported timber and tar for shipbuilding, flax and linen and corn, and it exported cloth from the English cloth industry. Now, the rivalry with the Hanseatic League soon became so fierce that Elizabeth was forced to kind of choose. And what she does actually is she expels the League's merchants from England. And the steel yard is closed in 1598. So we see there the kind of entrance of English merchants on a global stage again, because we have the competition with the Hanseatic League. Now, remember as well, I've talked about in previous videos that English trade focused the move from Antwerp to Amsterdam, particularly because of the Spanish dominance of Antwerp at this time. Okay, so one thing which isn't particularly nice to talk about, but we have to mention, is the slave trade. So Hawkins. Now, Hawkins received a commission from Queen Elizabeth I, which allowed him to privateer. England is not at war with Spain, but the commission allowed Hawkins to plunder the Spanish fleet for loot. Hawkins formed a syndicate of wealthy merchants to invest in trade, and in 1562, he set sail with 3 ships to Sierra Leone. He captured 300 slaves and took them to the plantations in America, where he traded them for pearls, hides, and sugar. This was so profitable that he went on to make a further 2 other expeditions. The Queen herself even financially supported and contributed to the second expedition, and this really saw England's entrance into the slave trade, which unfortunately was a highly profitable industry at the time. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is Protestantism. So the expansion of trade is still seen by many historians at this time as being linked to the development of Protestantism. A German economist called Max Weber suggested it was significant that the countries of northwestern Europe that formed the Hanseatic League were all strongly Protestant. Some make the claim that it was England's Protestantism that laid a foundation for England's political and economic dominance by the 18th century. And you can link that to the idea that the Hanseatic League were very willing to trade with England, and they saw an entrance into that kind of market and that world because of their Protestant background. Now, it's just a theory. You can agree with it, or you don't have to. But it's an interesting kind of more high level A-star analytic idea that actually is there a dominant link between Protestantism and trade, and it also gives you there a way you can also connect some other concepts into essays. A religion essay on the benefits of Protestantism. Well, you can mention trade there too. Okay, that's it, guys. So stay tuned. We'll watch the whole series of the finance videos to really get a flavour of financial policy under Elizabeth and the benefits and the weaknesses. In earlier videos, I talk more about the impact on ordinary people and whether there was overall, therefore, a benefit or a success or a failure of Elizabethan financial policy. And that's that.